Good afternoon, and welcome to Creating a User-Friendly Data Ecosystem, a webinar tweet chat combo from healthsystemCIO.com, sponsored by Collibra. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the editor-in-chief of healthsystemCIO.com, and I will be your moderator today. We are having a simultaneous tweet chat hosted by Kate Gamble, our managing editor and director of social media. You can participate in a separate browser or on your phone by using the hashtag HSCIOchat, or you can simply view the tweet chat on the right-hand side of your screen and enjoy it in that fashion. You'll also be using the Q&A box today to submit questions. Type them in as they occur to you and send them in, and we'll take them later in the program. And you can download the deck by using the URL on your screen. It's at the bottom of our slides, and it's been sent out in the chat box. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to go about 35 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Kirk Hanson, Director of Enterprise Data Governance with Geisinger, Dr. Omid Shabestari, Director of Health Analytics with the Carilion Clinic, and Chris Cooper, Healthcare Sales and Strategy Leader with Collibra. So let's jump right in. Kirk, do you want to give us an overview of your organization and your role?
Sure. Geisinger is we're an integrated healthcare delivery system. So we've got healthcare providers, a number of hospitals, and lots of clinics, primary care and specialty care clinics, a number of other different healthcare settings in there as well. My role as the Director of Enterprise Data Governance is to help the enterprise get more and more value from our data. And we do that by optimizing data content, access, and quality. That's kind of a given. But one very important role that we have in the data governance team is to champion data literacy, and I think that plays in today's topic really, really well, because you could be doing those other things, content, access, and quality, really well, but if nobody's using the data, it's only potential value. You're not getting actual value. And we would define data literacy as exactly that, when everyone who could be using data to improve their business units' activities is using data.
Well, that's great. That's exactly, I think, what we're going to focus on today, that concept of getting a hold of the data by the users directly. Dr. Shabestari?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I work with Carilion Clinic. We are a non-for-profit healthcare organization, mostly serving the population in southern part of Virginia. Similarly, we have different levels of service as primary and secondary care. I'm the Director of Healthcare Analytics. At the same time, I chair our Data Governance Council. And as part of that, what we work on is we are working on our business glossary, making it available, and as Kirk mentioned, useful and used by the end users. At the same time, we have other initiatives to make sure that we clean up the data in a ready-to-consume manner for the end users.
Very good. Chris?
Thanks, Anthony. Chris Cooper. I work with a number of healthcare organizations as part of Collibra's healthcare team. Collibra is a software vendor that's focused on helping organizations find, understand, and trust their data as part of an integrated data governance platform that we deliver as both an on-premise and cloud-based solution. I've got a long background in healthcare data management, working on a broad range of initiatives ranging from master data to analytics, with a strong focus on customer enablement around data. Certainly a strong believer that the value we can unlock in the healthcare system is only limited by the number of people that we can have us help move this boulder up the hill.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. All right, Dr. Shabestari, let's start with you on this question. Describe the data governance approach at your health system.
Thank you. We have a multi-tier approach. We have our executive council at the top that enforces and advises the organization about the standard definitions that we want to use and the sources to be used. Then we have our data governance council, which are middle layer executive in the organization. They help drive directions of what should be the focus of emphasis for the data governance. And then we have data stewards whose responsibility is to help us identify the sources, consolidate them, and put correct definitions around them. Okay,
very good. Kirk?
At Geisinger, our data governance approach is also multi-tiered. At our executive level, we're counting on our executives to prioritize the data governance work that's in front of us. And I'm sure, as most organizations are facing, we're also facing a really more work than we could actually do. It's really important to prioritize it. Then we have a middle tier of what we call data leaders. These are folks who are intimately involved with the data on a daily basis, and we're relying on that tier to help us maintain the standards that are going to be expected for any of the data governance activities that we pursue. And then to actually do the work of the various data governance activities, we use an agile methodology approach. We've formed what we call data governance scrum teams, and these data governance scrum teams can be aimed at activities within any number of programs. Data quality management, so mastering data or data quality improvement projects. Data source management, so this is the kind of the detailed tasks involved with onboarding data sources into our enterprise data warehouse, and then reference data management, which is creating data tables and databases that don't exist that would be of value to any number of the important business processes around the enterprise.
Dr. Shabestari, do you use any type of, Kirk mentioned agile methodology and scrum teams. Do you use anything like that or something similar?
We definitely go through the sprint processes, but mostly the epic type of initiatives that we start mostly are driven by intake processes of new sources of information that we have. We are going through rapid inquiry of new solutions for different purposes that we use in organization, and many of them, they come with their own data dictionaries and definitions that needs to be mapped and translated into our core business glossary.
Okay, very good. All right, next question. Kirk, let's go with you on this one. When we talk about data governance, we usually talk about data entry, using common terms, etc., but what about the issue of users extracting data? You touched on it. That's data literacy. Your thoughts around that?
Yeah, making data available to the many folks who could be using data is kind of the holy grail of an analytics program. And what we've learned over the years here at Geisinger is that it's actually the packaging of the data that's very challenging for the folks who could be using it. So it's a bit of a paradigm shift, but for years we have allowed the folks who would consume our analytics to submit requests for analytics reports, or if a business unit wanted a dashboard built, something along those lines. And of course, it takes a while to fulfill those requests. Often it takes so long to fulfill those requests that by the time it's actually delivered, unfortunately, the reason behind requesting that analytic has kind of gone by. So increasingly, it's become important to put that capability on the very front lines. The paradigm shift that we're in the middle of implementing is to create, instead of creating analytics reports and dashboards, instead we're focusing on creating data sets that can be used for multiple analytics. So, and these data sets are tailored to a specific business unit. So, every business unit is the data that's important to a given business unit is going to be different across the different business units. So instead, we're focusing our efforts on creating a durable data set that we can deliver to that business unit, and then this is the part that we're really excited about. We're putting in the hands of the folks who will do the analytics very, very intuitive BI tools, business intelligence tools. So there's some great ones out there. But unfortunately, even the ones that are billed as being really easy to use, for the non-analysts, they're really not that easy to use. So we've discovered a class of BI tools. It's really search-based query tools that when they're married up with a tailored data set for a business unit in a very natural way, essentially like typing in a Google search, these business units can what if this tailored data set to their heart's content as quickly as they can formulate questions about what's going on in their business unit. These BI tools can deliver against that. We're on the very leading edge of delivering this capability to the enterprise, but the results to date have been very, very encouraging. We're really excited about it.
Very good. Dr. Shabestari, your thoughts on the question or anything Kirk said?
I think Kirk made great points. One thing that I would like to add is there's always an element of trade-off in exercising this, and that to some degree depends on the immediate needs of the users and how this can be generalized or got to a focus point. I would like to give an example on this. For example, we know that in our healthcare systems we have a variety of different type of encounters, and some of them get materialized and executed and completed, and some of them get canceled for whatever reason. So the question would remain whether you want to include every encounter in the data set that you are creating or only the ones that are executed and completed. And similar to the point that Kirk made, we ended up creating several logical layers that can separate these out and introduce it to the users. But then this parallelism will bring an opportunity for us to put clear definitions around this, that if you want this portion of information for this purpose, that's the logical unit or prospect or whatever you want to call it, depending on the tool that you are using, that you need to look into. Otherwise, there is definitely a lot of opportunities with regard to natural language querying of the data systems. We haven't got to the point to be fully comfortable that they can completely parse the intent of users. And sometimes things would be looked into in a context which is not exactly the one that meant to be. So we are making progress on that, but I would definitely follow up with Kirk on the lessons that they've learned.
Kirk, any thoughts on that?
It is definitely true that it can that building the data set can get very complex. We certainly aren't relying on our user base to do that work. In fact, it does require a fairly technical skill set and a fairly specialized set of tools. One thing that helps us a lot in this area, though, what we've learned is that if we can expose the data that's available to our business users, and one really excellent tool that we've used very successfully for this is Collibra, the data cataloging component of the Collibra tool set. Then our users can essentially shop for data. And already have a pretty good idea of what this data set tailored for their business unit would look like. It saves an awful lot of time up front in designing these data sets. And the other thing that we've learned is that over time, the specific needs in that data set will evolve. Some data elements will become less important as the business unit achieves certain operational goals, but new data elements will become important, new data elements that weren't built into the data set in the beginning, and giving the users in the business units an opportunity to essentially shop for new data elements that they would like so that they can, in a very specific way, request to have new columns added to their tailored data set. Really streamlines the process, and it really it puts the business units in the driver's seat, which is ultimately what you want in a program like this.
Chris, your thoughts on the question or this great back and forth we're having?
Great discussion, Anthony, and certainly I think there's a lot of opportunity for organizations to really understand and consider the context that users have as they're working with their data. And certainly we see, when users are creating data or inputting data, there's generally a lot of context. There's a reason that data is being captured. So, whether it's a nurse recording a blood pressure for a patient in a surgical unit, there's a lot of context or metadata that's available as that information is captured or recorded originally. Now, whether we retain all of that is sometimes a subject of discussion. But if we think about the other side of that equation as I'm starting to extract or access data, there's not a lot of context that the user brings to the table. And so we need to really make it easy for the user to marry the context at which they're looking for that data. Doing a longitudinal study, so what does that mean about the context of the data that I'm working with? And so being able to marry the context of how that data was actually captured to the context of how it's being consumed, I think is much of the challenge that governance and governance-related solutions are looking to address. And whether it's the applicability of natural language processing, but it's really about having that appropriate context. And certainly what we're seeing organizations doing as they're starting to develop and really leverage cataloging solutions to catalog reports and data sets that are available to the organization is providing not only the catalog of data that is available, but also the context that's needed or the metadata. Where did that data come from? What is that quality of that information? And so being able to provide as much of that additional context or metadata, certainly we view as key way to unlock the power of the data itself and help marry the context between how that data was originally captured and the consumer of that information and what they're looking to achieve. And we certainly think that that's as important as actually making the data available itself, is providing that context.
Very good. All right. Chris, I'm going to stick with you here. What level of technical skill among users should be assumed when evaluating data extraction interfaces? Obviously, you can have a huge difference, even among professionals like physicians, between an interest and ability to do these type of things. So where's your baseline? Who are you designing for? The person in the middle? Chris?
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, we're designing for. I certainly don't want to characterize anyone as being, maybe not capable. Healthcare organizations are filled with very, very bright people, of course. But what they don't have is the background and experience with the technical tools that would enable them to be able to create their own data set, or even once that data set is created, even to be able to put a BI tool on top of that data set. We think it makes a lot of sense to use our technical resources within the enterprise to handle those tasks. In fact, what we found with maybe a couple exceptions is it is the primary obstacle between somebody who has a need to use the data and actually being able to use the data, and we try to bridge that gap by applying our technical resources in just that spot.
Very good, Dr. Shabestari.
So what I can add to the conversation is with regard to the tools that are available, the purpose of the use, and also the technical skill as was discussed. In the context of that, I would like to add another aspect to this, and that would be around the version control. There is plenty of initiatives that people start to utilizing data, and as it goes toward the process to get materialized for the decision making, the data gets outdated. Or when, for example, they want to reuse the data for a later look into the same pattern, then the content has been modified and changed based on the new data coming in. So it's very important to have those tools in place, but then at the same time, there's an executive layer of oversight required to make sure that the information that is used is latest and greatest. As previously was mentioned by Kirk, there are a lot of good tools that now can directly talk to the source of information, and that will reduce a lot of hassle around reprocessing the information.
Chris, any thoughts?
Well, I think that this issue around skills is certainly one of the biggest challenges that we see healthcare organizations facing. And I think that if we truly are going to shift to become a more data-driven industry, we need to make concerted effort to address this. And I would agree with Kirk very much in the view that we have a lot of really bright people in healthcare, but they come from a background that isn't based in technology, isn't based in working with data. And so I think we need to make it very accessible for people without strong data skills to start to interact and work with the data that we do have available, because the reality is we simply can't hire enough folks, we can't bring enough folks in from outside industries who understand healthcare to answer the questions that we need to answer to make the needed improvements. And so certainly our view and my personal view is that it really does, we need to assume a fairly low barrier to entry so that we can bring along as many people as possible. And certainly what we've seen is that organizations that foster a open culture and acceptance of the fact that you don't understand data, it is okay as long as you're willing to enable yourself and participate. And so making that bar to entry as low as possible certainly is a goal of Collibra as well as our customers and where we've seen the greatest success. So being able to have very clear definitions around your data sets that you're working with. These are ways that people can become comfortable and grow the skills that are needed to make the transformation.
All right, next question. I'm pretty sure the answer to this is no, but maybe we'll get more color on it. Is it acceptable if clinicians are unable to run their own reports but must contact data stewards to pull the information they want? Is this acceptable for more complex data inquiries? So that may be the more interesting point. Do we get to a point in a query where it's okay and maybe even necessary to need to reach out to a professional, describe what you're trying to get, and then they have to work some magic? Kirk?
Well, two-part question. So the first part, you're right. It's not really acceptable that if a clinician wanted a standard analytic run, that he would have to contact somebody outside of, he'd have to contact a data steward or an analyst to do it. The way we address that is by creating dashboards that have many separate metrics on them. All of them are kind of the standard stuff, length of stay, and those kinds of analytics. But the second part, we think that's really the best use of our technical resources. You can't build a dashboard that's going to be able to answer any question, and that's where this idea of tailored and another important descriptive word for these data sets would be reusable. We want the data that's contained in these business unit focused data sets to be broad enough that any number of important questions that business unit might ask about how it's doing are addressable there. So although there is a lift up front in creating the data set, that lift is handled by the folks who are best able to deal with it, namely the ones who have the deep technical skills to work with the data. But they create this data set that's enduring, and then on top of that data set, the the relatively easy to use, actually these search-based query tools are really easy to use, very powerful. Sitting on top of that, anyone, even where Chris was talking about the very low bar to entry. Essentially anyone who has an interest in getting a quantitative answer is able to use these tools to get it with these data sets.
Dr. Shabestari?
What I would like to add is the intention for using that data. Generally speaking, some people intend to use the data for exploratory purposes, which is just slicing and dicing and looking at the data from different angles. That is served very well with creating those data sets. Sometimes people have some intentions for more explanatory / research-based use of the data. For that group, I would divide the audience in two categories. There are people who have the technical and the statistical skills to make those interpretations. Creating those data sets definitely helps them. But then there are other group of people that need more help to make sense of what the data says. And in addition to creating that data set, we need to provide them the support to understand the message coming from the patterns in the data.
Very good. Chris?
I think I would echo a lot of the comments that have been made for sure. But I think that there is a need to be able to focus, the technical data expertise that we do have to do the heavy lifting to prepare, combine, and make those data sets readily available. Certainly, Collibra's view is that it's a lot more than just, a BI tool that's required to address these challenges, and bringing along the context, the metadata, the definition, how that metric was calculated, the source of that data, when that data was last collected. These are all things that help, kind of enable people to become more self-sufficient, and certainly I think is key to unlocking the value. And so, just like, I'll change my own oil, I think that's, we have a level of skills that we can expect of almost anyone. But at the same time, I'm not ready to, rebuild my engine. And so leveraging our detailed skills, our data mechanics to be able to do that heavy lifting when required, I think makes the process more efficient.
Very good. You really change your oil?
I've been known to.
That's very impressive because that's beyond my skill. So, but we'll move on. And we'll stay on track.
Wiper blades. Wiper blades.
Yeah, I think I can do wiper blades. All right. What can be done to make data extraction from systems easier and more user-friendly? Chris?
One of the things that we really see that is unique in this space is the complexity of the data that we're working with. And so, Collibra really supports, and Kirk alluded to this earlier, the notion of creating logical data sets, which are consumable units of data that have not only the data pulled together, but also the appropriate metadata and context to understand and work with that data set. And being able to expose those data sets as units that organizations can work with. And if you think about it, asking someone to understand, 20 or 30,000 columns across a data warehouse is a big ask. But if I can limit that down to, a couple hundred data elements that are really critical for my part of the organization or my area of responsibility, that really helps to make this a much more approachable process. And then certainly Collibra creates the one-click linkage to be able to understand that data set. So how was that data defined and where did it come from? What's the lineage behind that? And so making the process as easy to use as possible is important in the sense that we have consumer mentality across all of our users, and so being able to compete with the Amazons of the world from an ease of use perspective is a challenge that we all, I think, have to take seriously, right or wrong. but making that as an integrated process, I think, is key. And the other big thing that we're seeing a lot of our healthcare customers doing is really making sure that they're exposing metadata, whether it's a definition or the way a metric or KPI is calculated, at the point of consumption. So being able to push updates back to your BI tools so that you have your definition right at the fingertips, and not asking people to, effectively go over to the bookshelf and look something up. So making it as much kind of an integrated context experience as possible.
Dr. Shabestari, I heard the other day that it described that Apple and Amazon have spoiled all of us because we expect that experience now, and everyone else is scrambling to catch up and provide it because it's now sort of what everyone wants. Does that make sense? And I'll just address the question as well.
I think that's a very good point. What needs to be more made available and known across the end users is the level of effort that goes beyond those simplified interfaces to get to that point. And what I would like to add to the conversation, which helps toward that, is the importance of master data management, because as we talked about, we will be utilizing many different sources, and making them translatable and connectable to the other sources of information is a challenge that many healthcare organizations either have faced or facing now, with new applications and tools coming in, and they bring their own definitions and categories of information. That's a must-have, I should say.
Very good. Kirk?
Yeah, Dr. Shabestari makes a great point. There's work to do even behind the data sets, and that's the important work of data quality. And I think it's probably fair to say that healthcare is well behind other industries in undertaking the very sizable task of mastering our important entities, but we've got to do that. There's and then the other important piece of work that needs to be done is it's just that gritty task of identifying critical data elements, that is, data elements that are supporting important business processes, and getting the quality up to the standard that they need to be. One very important element in being able to do both of those is having a tool where you can proudly display the acceptable or better than acceptable quality of some data elements, and conversely flag the data elements that are maybe below the acceptable threshold. That sort of transparency. It's one more way to encourage the potential users out there to take advantage of the tremendous benefit that's available to them in the data that a given enterprise holds.
That's an interesting point. Dr. Shabestari, do you do anything like that where you're flagging certain data elements to reflect their quality? So this is a high-quality number, and this is and I think that's what you were saying, Kirk, that somehow it's clear to the user that this has a low confidence or low quality. Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Exactly right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, of course, if it's an important data element, a critical data element, and the quality is low, you want to guide folks away from that one, especially if there are other suitable data elements available. Oftentimes, a metric can be calculated. You have a couple different options for data that you might use, or the data in one source might be less less acceptable than another, and it's tough work. It takes a lot of time to build up the to do the work to get to be able to display the quality of a given data element. But to the extent that an organization can dedicate the resources to do that, the payoff it gets better and better.
Dr. Shabestari?
So we take another angle of this great point that Kirk made. Our approach is a little bit more softer. What we do, and this is something that in the traditional research is very common, is just we took it and moved it to an enterprise grade, is that when we calculate some measures based on the sources, we provide to the users the level of confidence, or essentially the confidence interval that they can get from the data. And we let them decide whether that's a level of variance that they are comfortable playing it and making decision in that context.
Very good. Chris, your thoughts?
Certainly, I think that we're seeing that transparency around quality is absolutely critical, and core capability around the Collibra platform has been to bring in and make quality scores measurement available with each data asset. We've recently improved and extended that capability so we can actually view that within the lineage of where that data originates from, and it is a key differentiator across the process.
Very good. Kirk, I want to just follow up with you a little bit about this. What would cause a data element to have low confidence, and is there anything that can be done to go back, I don't know, upstream or downstream, and fix that, depending on your direction?
Sure. Oh, well, there are a variety of attributes that impact the quality of data. One of the simplest to talk about is just completeness. So does every record that contains this particular data element, is that data element, is there a value? Unfortunately, for some very important data elements, even in an electronic health record, the values are null. One example I could give you is there's a data element in an electronic health record that essentially tells you whether a patient is alive or deceased. For years, and in that field, there's a value for alive, there's a value for deceased, and then of course there's if there's no value, if it's null, you have to make a decision about how to treat that. Unfortunately, what you find is that many times for a given patient, that field is null, and for years there's been the tendency to make the assumption that, well, if it's null, the patient is alive.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's not always the case.
Right.
So, and it can get, it's definitely problematic to handle patient's data as if the patient were alive when in fact they aren't. So when you've got a situation like that, there's a number of different ways you can address it. One is to try to do everything you can to populate that field appropriately. So you're asking folks to go in and if it's a null value, to essentially make the call. Is it a 1 or is it a 2? 1 is alive, 2 is deceased. The other way you can handle it, though, is you can create some transformation rules that can cross-check other indicators of the patient's status, and then you can create, instead of relying on just that single data element, you can combine information from a number of different data elements, and then that essentially a derived value is much more reliable. And in certain important cases, the one I just illustrated, that's exactly what we've done. So it's essentially a model data element, and when that particular piece of information is important to an analytic, we guide our folks who are building analytics to use that derived value instead of going to some of these more less reliable data elements.
Very good. All right. Next question, Dr. Shabestari. Let's start with you. Is training on data extraction tools necessary? Any advice on what type of training and how much? And does training need to be tailored to role? Doctor, nurse, administrative, that type of thing.
That probably is very much dependent on the structure of analytics in an organization. If you have a center of excellence, probably you need wider training for those people to be able to have the knowledge across different data elements. If you are using a snowflake type model that people have their own analysts, probably the best solution is to tailor focus their training on the elements which is necessary for this department or unit that they are serving. The other factor that drives is how you've tooled up your system. If it's built into the tools that the direct access is only to the structure that they will be using, probably it makes it a lot more user-friendly and less effort required to utilize those. If it's something that requires more effort to pull the data, then they need another level of training. The other factor that we see quite a trend across the analysts is people have different levels of skills. Some people are more comfortable to use flat structures, and they are not very comfortable with using any kind of relational model, depending on how vast of data they need to deal with and whether there is an opportunity to create any form of data mart for them. They might need that level of additional training to be able to cross-connect and relate the different sources together at the point of use.
Very good. Chris, thoughts?
Certainly Collibra's goal is to lower that bar to entry and make and minimize the amount of training. Now, certainly we do support the notion that people do need some level of skill, but providing curated data sets certainly helps that process, especially when you've got a certification and review process so that you can help consumers of information who are doing that data extraction or accessing that data really understand what is the level of quality, what is the certification process that data set has been through. It can certainly help lower that bar to entry. And we definitely see that, across an organization, you have a wide range of training that's required for different consumers. Being able to find the right report is very different than being able to create a new data set for user, and certainly being able to facilitate the interaction across those users is something that I think historically there's been a fairly significant gap in, and certainly Collibra looks to address through a number of collaboration features and structured workflows.
Very good. Kirk?
Chris is making a great point. I think Geisinger's experience is if we're requiring our users to be able to deal with the relational databases or even a dimensional model, that's that leap that in most cases is just a little bit tough for them to make, and for as long as we tried, we kind of flatlined on the growth of our user base. It's now that we're kind of taking that requirement off the table. That requirement to kind of understand the way data works in its at the technical level. Taking that off of the table, it's kind of reinvigorated the growth that we're seeing in our user base, and it's exactly what's been described. It's creating these essentially flat files of data. I mean, I think across the board, everyone is very comfortable using something like an Excel spreadsheet, which is what these flat files resemble, of course, and they don't have to have any kind of a mental model of how the data is joined or how it relates to each other. It's just clearly laid out in the table. This, we think, is making the value of our data accessible to a much higher percentage of our potential users.
Very good. All right, we are going to go with our Ask a Co-Panelist feature, which I really enjoy. Kirk, let's put you on the hot seat first. The question for one or both of your co-panelists.
Sure. Well, I'd like to ask Chris a quick question. Are there, this whole concept of data literacy has really opened up some important doors for us, and I'm wondering if the Collibra tool set is thinking about anything on the roadmap that might even might expand on the capabilities that are already present in Collibra.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. And definitely I would say that this is a key focus for us strategically. And, it begins with, I would say, simple things to simplify that user experience. You may be familiar with, Collibra on the go, which is our ability to really integrate into the user's desktop and search for definitions directly from, virtually any application. Be able to relate and link to existing metadata, to be able to push your governed metadata and content back to your BI tools to really seamlessly integrate that use are all things that we see as critical to driving this and lowering the bars to adoption across the set of data sets that we're working with. The other things that we are certainly focused on is looking to apply machine learning and AI where possible to make sure that we are putting the right data in front of the user based on what we know about their context. So what department are they or what groups are they a part of in their organization? And so when they're looking for things related to length of stay, is that a quality view of length of stay, or is that the organization's financial view of length of stay? So a few of the things that we are certainly working on, and again, continuing to push that open view, making sure that not only is data available, but the appropriate metadata.
Very good. All right, Dr. Shabestari, a question for one or both of your co-panelists.
So this is a question that I would love both Chris and Kirk to chime in, because this is a reality that all of us will be facing, and it would be very interesting both for them and also our audience to think through this. We've already been dealing with a huge amount of data from different sources in our existing walls. With the notion of bringing your own data and the patient-generated information and all these sensors and different tools that people will be using to monitor their health, we will be facing a lot of variety around different type of data coming in with different structures. And the unfortunate fact is there's not much standard around that. So how can we make ourselves ready for that huge flow of information coming in? And how can we make the best use of that information by a good understanding of them?
Kirk, let's go with you first.
Yeah, well, so Chris was talking about AI and ML. Gosh, I think that's an area where AI and ML can really help us. You're right, Dr. Shabestari. That it's a huge tidal wave about ready to crash down on our heads. In fact, we in some areas we already see it. If you're using RFID data, for example, to try to track the location of medical equipment or that sort of thing, you're already dealing with huge volumes of data that's not that easy to work with, quite honestly. And having a little bit of AI in your hip pocket to help you sort through that would be really useful. Geisinger, we're AI and ML right now, I think, are probably pretty early in the hype cycle. Everybody's talking about it. Not too many organizations are actually delivering on let's call it the promise. But in order to do that, you have to try it. And Geisinger, we've rolled up our sleeves and we're trying to pull together an AI ML program to try to harness those capabilities against problems just like Dr. Shabestari is talking about.
Very good. Chris?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Shabestari, and I think that what we see is that while it's easy to be, distracted by some of these, volumes and new sources and new technologies applying to the data, the organizations that are in the best position to be able to deal with them have done the hard work to get their house in order, to have good stewardship, to understand, okay, when we have, patient-collected data, how does that factor into our care process? Do we have a policy for dealing with that? Do we organizationally understand how that fits within our overall data landscape versus forcing our clinicians or our analysts to deal with those questions on an ad hoc basis? So being able to understand the quality of your internal data is really required before you can even begin to put any kind of assessment or even comparison on that patient-collected data that may be coming in. So, I don't underestimate the significance of that tidal wave that is coming. But in many ways, I think the best thing we can do is to continue to get our house in order, make sure that we have a good, solid set of data policies and processes around what we have today, so that as we've developed the muscles from a governance perspective to be able to deal with these new sources as they come on board.
Excellent. Well, that is about all we had time for today. When you close out your WebEx window, you're going to be taken to a post-event survey. If you could take a moment to answer that, we'd appreciate it. Regarding continuing education, for those of you who hold the Chime CHCIO certification, attending our webinars gets you 1 CEU. So let Chime know you were here, and if you've asked us to do so, we will. If you need a certificate of attendance for another CEU program, you can use the final slide in this deck. You'll receive an email when our archive recording has been posted to our YouTube channel. And if you'd like us to produce a webinar on the topic of your choice, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox on our team. To view our upcoming schedule, you can go to our website. So with that, I want to thank our panel, Kirk, Hanson, Dr. Omid Shabestari, and Chris Cooper, and I want to very much thank Collibra for making this great conversation possible. And I want to thank you, our attendees, for continuing to come to our events. With that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.